Hi there, and welcome to Philadelphia. You are about to engage with the ideas from the Constitutional Convention of 1787. While the game is based on real debates and historical arguments, this is not a reenactment. Your goal is to work with the ideas presented to create compromises that can move the convention forward. Not all compromises are or were the ideal outcomes. At the end, you will discover how your work compares to what really happened. The Articles of Confederation created a central government to win the war and unite the new states. It was so weak that it lacked the money to pay federal employees, as well as massive war debts. Revolutionary War veterans did not even receive their pensions. Congress wanted to review the Articles to see if they could be fixed, giving our young country a better chance at success. Delegates from 12 of the 13 states met in Philadelphia and decided to start over from scratch. They invited General George Washington to Philadelphia to lead the convention. The 55 men gathered here were only a slice of our nation's diverse population. While everyone in 1787 was interested in the convention, men without land, women, youth, enslaved people, free people of color, and members of tribal nations were not allowed to participate. Excluding these voices influenced the debates, compromises, and our nation's history in countless ways. Select a topic below to get some important context before you jump into the debate. General Washington will take you from there. After the American Revolution, the states realized that the limited government created under the Articles of Confederation needed to be revised. State delegates met in Philadelphia to address the issues of the young nation.
Our current government struggles to collect taxes, protect itself, and make important decisions. There is agreement that things need to change. But how? We must also make sure states keep some of their independence. Can we unite the country while respecting state decision-making power? Now let's hear from the delegates.
There are great concerns over both the clear weaknesses of our current government and the risk of overcorrecting. More power in the central government means less power for the states. We are large and still growing. How can one government balance the interest of a population that spans such a wide area with such diverse needs?
Our country must have enough powers in the national government to remain united and strong. We need to collect money through taxes, a strong military force, and a way to support a court system. All these powers should live in a Congress that can make the best decisions for the nation as a whole.
It sounds like these approaches are in conflict. We can use this to craft a compromise that allows us to move forward with the convention. But before you build out a compromise using the delegates' ideas, let's hear more.
Our new government must be limited. Its power should be divided with checks and balances, and the states must keep control over their own business.
The power to raise taxes should be given to Congress. We need to create federal courts and establish a standing army. Our current government is not large enough to address the needs of the people. We must grow.
Here's more to consider. A powerful central government should not be limited in any way. Getting too detailed is risky. Let's leave the plan for government open for interpretation. Now that there are some ideas to work with, start building out a compromise that works. Those two ideas are in conflict. Pick one to remove. I see there's now a path forward.
Let's take a look at how this proposal compares to what actually happened at the convention. Very interesting. There was actually a lot of consensus on these items. Congress needed the power to tax, and the new central government needed to be stronger without destroying the states. All agreed, if begrudgingly, that the country needed a national perspective on the courts and trade, and an executive that could lead the standing army. The disagreements came in the details. This set up our federalist system of shared powers. Some powers are reserved for the states, while others are granted to the national government. Our nation's history is full of the tensions that can be found between the federal government and the states.
Select a topic below to get some important context before you jump into the debate. General Washington will take you from there. As delegates built the new national government, they also worked to get the best deal for their home state. The smaller states with smaller populations wanted to keep things on equal footing, while the larger states wanted to make the most of their size, wealth, and population.
The Congress created under the Articles isn't effective. It lacks the powers needed for a country to be strong and united. The Articles give each state the same power of a single vote. The bigger states with larger populations argue that is unfair. How can we find balance in our legislative branch? Let us now hear from the delegates.
New Jersey is small. We propose that we keep the single House of Congress as we have under the Articles of Confederation. Each state sends the same number of representatives to Congress. If we move to having representation based on population, states with small votes may fade away. No state should have more power over another.
We propose a Congress with two houses. Each state sends a number of representatives based on its population. We think proportional representation is the best way to make sure Congress reflects the people. Having a lot of people in your state should give you more of a voice in decisions.
It sounds like these approaches are in conflict. We can use this to craft a compromise that allows us to move forward with the convention. But before you build out a compromise using the delegates' ideas, let's hear more.
We should maintain the single House of Congress. And each state should have the same number of votes.
No, we need two houses of Congress. And if a state has more people, it should have more votes.
Here's more to consider. Have part of Congress be based on population, and the other part based on equal representation. Wealthy states should have more representation than poorer states. Now that there are some ideas to work with, start building out a compromise that works. Those two ideas are in conflict. Pick one to remove. Those two ideas are in conflict. Pick one. Those two ideas are in conflict. Pick one. I see there's now a path forward.
Let's take a look at how this proposal compares to what actually happened at the convention. Interesting approach. Imagine what our nation might look like today if they had gone in that direction. In the end, both small and large state delegates gained a chamber of Congress that reflected their interest. The Senate had equal representation, while the House of Representatives reflected the population differences. As the population of individual states grows or declines, the House changes. The 2020 census resulted in 6 states gaining 1 or 2 seats in the House, and 7 states losing 1 seat.
Select a topic below to get some important context before you jump into the debate. General Washington will take you from there. Even as British citizens, colonists had individual rights and protection from the government, like the right to a jury trial. After gaining independence from the British, many states had individual rights listed in their state constitutions. This tradition carried into the convention and heavily impacted the ratification debates that followed.
With the final draft of the Constitution underway, another issue was raised, and it was a big one. Some wanted to see a Bill of Rights, commonly found in existing state constitutions. Adding a Bill of Rights might help with ratification, but after 4 long months, will the delegates agree to work a little longer? We will need to work out which rights should be included. Let's hear from the delegates.
State constitutions already have bills of rights protecting us. The powers of the new government are listed and specific. The government lacks the power to, say, suspend freedom of speech or take away the right to a jury trial. Listing some rights could also bring attention to the ones that aren't listed, and we can't possibly list every individual right.
The state constitutions won't protect the people's rights because the new government is supreme over state law. The powers of Congress are vague and broad. A Bill of Rights will remind us that the government is designed to protect an individual's freedom. The people will be more comfortable with the new, much stronger central government.
It sounds like these approaches are in conflict. We can use this to craft a compromise that allows us to move forward with the convention. But before you build out a compromise using the delegates' ideas, let's hear more.
We do not need a national Bill of Rights in the new Constitution.
We must make sure that there is a Bill of Rights that applies to this new government.
Here's more to consider. Let each state's Bill of Rights protect individual rights. We should move ahead with the current Constitution and come back to this issue after ratification. At the end of the document, we will promise that the new government won't take away any rights. Now that there are some ideas to work with, start building out a compromise that works. Those two ideas are in conflict. Pick one to remove. Those two ideas are in conflict. Those two ideas are... Those two ideas are in conflict. I see there is now a path forward.
Let's take a look at how this proposal compares to what actually happened at the convention. Well, you found a path, which is more that could be said of our friends at the convention. These gentlemen were tired after months of nation building and wanted to return home. This decision not to add the Bill of Rights to the Constitution while they were in Philadelphia came back to haunt them. The issue was key during the ratification debates. Promises were made, and in 1791, the first 10 amendments were added.
Select a topic below to get some important context before you jump into the debate. General Washington will take you from there. While the word slavery isn't in the Constitution, the institution played a major role in the debates that created the document. At least 25 of the 55 delegates in Philadelphia owned enslaved people at some point. They were all white, and their debate over representation did not engage the humanity of the almost 700,000 enslaved people across the states. The delegates in the room were focused solely on the power that population could give one state over another.
A state's population is an important number. It is one way to represent a state's value to the nation, and more people means more power in the House of Representatives. Slavery complicates things. How should enslaved people be included in the population count? If counted, states with large enslaved populations will seize lawmaking power. And while all states gain wealth from a large unpaid labor force, most northern states have few enslaved people. Let's now hear from the delegates.
Slavery violates our values as a republic, and it is immoral. How can some delegates claim that slaves are property but include them in the larger population count? Including slaves gives some southern states more power than states with few or no enslaved people. Counting slaves is also unfair to states like mine.
The institution of slavery is critical to the economies of the southern states, including mine. Some delegates are willing to walk away from this convention if that institution is threatened. If we can't base the number of representatives on the full population, we should consider partial counts of the enslaved population done in the Articles.
It sounds like these approaches are in conflict. We can use this to craft a compromise that allows us to move forward with the convention. But before you build out a compromise using the delegates' ideas, let's hear more.
We must not count any enslaved people when determining representation.
We should count all enslaved people when determining representation. I think we should use the same approach as the Articles of Confederation.
Here's more to consider. Count a set portion of the enslaved population as part of the represented population. Instead of counting people for representation, count the wealth of the states. Count the enslaved people as part of the represented population, but only for a certain number of years. Now that there are some ideas to work with, start building out a compromise that works. Those two ideas are in conflict. Those two ideas are in conflict. Pick. I see there's now a path forward.
Let's take a look at how this proposal compares to what actually happened in the convention. That approach would have changed history. The compromise counted 3/5 of the enslaved population for representation, but did not grant freedom or political rights. The southern states used their outsized power to make sure that they'd benefit politically from their large enslaved populations. Doing so gave them a legislative advantage in the House and tipped the scales for presidential elections. Not undone until the abolition of slavery in 1865. The 3/5 compromise had a lasting impact on the legal, economic, and social structures in our nation.
Select a topic below to get some important context before you jump into the debate. 11 years may have passed since the start of the American Revolution, but no one had forgotten what it was like to live under a monarch who had become a tyrant. No one wanted that again, but all agreed that someone needed to be in charge, maybe more than one person. But leaving things to a weak and decentralized Congress wasn't working.
As a vision for a new kind of government takes shape, attention turns to a missing piece: the national executive role. We need a general authority to execute or carry out national laws. But who? A single leader? A group? How would it work? What's the selection process? What were the terms of office? There is so much to discuss and debate. Let's hear from the delegates.
We need someone who has the authority to make decisions quickly, but does not have too much power. We also need a stable leader who can make the difficult decisions needed for a strong and united country.
As representatives of our states, we must focus on protecting our interests and power in this new national government. There is still a fear that one man in power would end up like a king, and no one wants that. Imagine one man leading an army of his very own.
It sounds like these approaches are in conflict. We can use this to craft a compromise that allows us to move forward with the convention. But before you build out a compromise using the delegates' ideas, let's hear more.
We propose that a single person should serve as the executive. And the executive should be selected by Congress with a longer term of office.
No, a group of people should serve as the executive. And the executive must be selected by the people, but with a shorter term of office.
Here's more to consider. State governments make plans for how they will select the leader, with 4-year terms. Now that there are some ideas to work with, start building out a compromise that works. I see there is now a path forward.
Let's take a look at how this proposal compares to what actually happened at the convention. Okay then, the real compromise had a single executive who served a 4-year term and would be picked by what we now call the Electoral College. There were many additional conversations around the national executive. These set up more details for our new president and the executive branch. And our first president, George Washington, set a precedent for many more things that we've come to know as presidential.
Jump into the debate. General Washington will take you from there. Some states relied heavily on people trafficked from Africa. They wanted to ensure state governments remained in control of decisions relating to the transatlantic slave trade. The delegates, more than half of them slaveholders, focused on the powers of the states, the economic system of slavery, and the unity of the new government over the humanity of those trafficked.
This debate looks at the shifting power between the states and the federal government. All states benefit financially from the trade in enslaved people and the free use of their labor. Some delegates take a personal stand against the practice of slavery. Others, from states where slavery is common, threaten to leave the convention if the federal government bans the importation of enslaved people. Will the Constitution regulate the importation of enslaved people, or will it be left to the states to decide? Over to the delegates!
Allowing the slave trade to continue is not the best direction for this new nation. Some states like Georgia and South Carolina may protest and threaten to leave our union, but it is an empty threat. Allowing this to continue is dishonorable to the national character and is not in line with the principles of the Revolution.
It is better that we allow the continued importation of enslaved people than to lose Georgia and South Carolina. We need broad support for this Constitution. While some states don't engage with the institution of slavery or the importation of humans, all benefit from the trade of goods and wealth created from it.
It sounds like these approaches are in conflict. But before you build out a compromise using the delegates' ideas, let's hear more.
We must address the importation of enslaved people in the Constitution. The Constitution should clearly ban the importation of enslaved Africans to the United States.
We cannot include the issue of the slave trade in the Constitution. And we must allow the slave trade to continue or risk a failed Constitution. We could also leave this to the states to decide how to deal with the trade.
Here's more to consider. Use the Constitution to delay any laws that ban the slave trade. Now that there are some ideas to work with, start building out a compromise that works. Those two ideas are in conflict. Pick one to remove. Those two ideas are in conflict. Those two ideas are in conflict. Pick one to remove. Those two ideas are in conflict. Pick one. I see that we were unable to reach a proposal.
Let's take a look at how this proposal compares to what actually happened at the convention. None of these compromises feel right, do they? Why didn't they just ban both the slave trade and slavery in the Constitution? Many of the states had slavery at the core of their economic and social structures. Unifying the country took priority. The convention would have ended without a compromise on this. They finally agreed to allow the Constitution to block Congress from any ban until 1808. This kept the southern states in the conversation and the Union, but left the possibility to ban the importation of slaves in the future. The ban took effect in 1808, yet the illegal importation of people from Africa and the Caribbean continued, and trade of enslaved people within the nation's borders grew. It took another 57 years, a bloody civil war, and the 13th Amendment for the institution of slavery to end in the U.S.
People differ, and compromise is never easy. Sometimes personal interests and beliefs outweigh a shared goal, and things come to a standstill or impasse. The debates in 1787 did result in a set of compromises that shaped the country we have today. Without those, the convention would have ended without the Constitution.